How would a perfect money system, what would that look like?
Well, I don't know if there's any such thing as perfection in this
Well,
fallen world.
a good one that makes sense
Sure.
in that, without inflation, where that doesn't deteriorate.
Well, I would argue that a perfect system, in a coming day, perhaps of a more enlightened humanity, we would have something like this. On the one hand, we would have full reserve banking as far as the deposit function is concerned.
Can you define that again?
Well, what we said regarding the Bank of Amsterdam, in other words, banks would not be allowed to create new money.
None? They have to?
No.
The only thing they can loan is what they have?
Well, but the thing is, you can also, like, for example, when you put money in a CD in a bank, that's technically not that's not a demand account, because that's why there's a term associated with a CD, and if you withdraw the money before the term expires, there's a penalty, because that contract means, yes, I'm loaning the money to the bank, they're paying me interest over an agreed upon period of time, and they do have the right then to turn around and loan that money out to someone else and make interest on it in return.
I have to leave it there.
But I have to leave it there, so there's no double claim on the money. That's the point.
Yes.
So the fact that there's no double claim means that $20,000 in my CD or whatever it is not going to magically become $40,000 or something, because it's actually being used for two purposes, and the bank is assuming and hoping against hope that I don't come by and claim it. Okay? But a demand account is different. So it would require a legal system that would clearly distinguish between the deposit function and the associated demand, requirement, demand account, and basically a loan account. I mean, it would still be legitimate to come to a bank and say, okay, I've got this money, I don't need it for the next 2 years. You can have it as long as you pay me some money. I won't touch it. I'll sign a contract to that effect, and you in turn can loan it out. That's perfectly legitimate.
Yeah.
What's not legitimate is if I say, I'm coming here with $100,000, I'm going to open a checking account or a demand savings account. Right, yeah. And my assumption is that I can come and access any portion of that at any time, and the bank agrees to do that, but we both sort of know that they aren't really going to do that, right? So there's that moral ambiguity that needs to be gotten rid of. First thing. Second thing.
Precious metals?
There would be we had, in the United States, we never had a gold standard. We had a bimetallic standard, which is different. That means that, and this was established by the U.S. Constitution. I think it's a good idea. Although, there was some. It's not a perfect system, because the value of gold and silver with respect to one another always fluctuates a little bit. So there are people, on the libertarian side who argue that only a gold standard would really avail us.
Yeah.
But I would, one way or the other, I would say you would want to have what's called, fiduciary money would probably work. There are three types of money. Okay, so. Commodity money is when you only have gold and silver, or grain or copper or something else, and that's your money right there.
Okay.
Now, obviously, fiat money is when none of that exists and it's only paper or some kind of other evanescent thing like a computer entry that stands for money. In the middle is what's called fiduciary money, and that's what we had in general. Now, fiduciary money means a money that is either commodity money or stands in representation thereof. So if I'm a bank and you come and deposit a certain amount of gold and silver, and I issue, a bill, a claim note on that, and then you go out and use that as money with the understanding that it can be fully redeemed at any time. That's a fiduciary type agreement, and that I think is valid as well.
Yeah, I thought, by that definition, I thought that was my impression that's what the precious metal standard was, but.
Well, again, there are two types of precious metal standards, because there are more or less three types of money. Okay? So now one other thing, a question people often ask, they have this derogatory term, gold bug, after the famous Edgar Allan Poe short story. And a gold bug is someone who dogmatically insists on the need for a gold standard.
Yeah.
And so gold bugs are portrayed by mainstream economists as being these fanatics. Okay, so the question, and it's a valid question, and you kind of alluded to it earlier when you said, well, now hasn't the current system been responsible for all this prosperity and so forth and so on? Well, why is gold such a good thing as far as money is concerned? Well, because of the characteristics of gold. And here are a few of them. Number one, it's portable. It can be carried from place to place. And that might seem silly, but it might seem obvious. But some cultures, like the Yap Islanders of the Pacific Ocean, had gigantic stones as money. And that's interesting. They're but you can't carry them around. They're not very convenient. Right?
Well, they'd be hard to exchange too, right?
Right, so gold is very portable. It's also very divisible. So you can divide it into smaller units. That's a useful characteristic. It lasts forever.
Yeah, it's durable, huh?
It's durable. So durability is another characteristic. Paper certainly is not.
Yeah.
Okay. It's scarce. And actually, let's come back to scarce a minute. It's useful, inherently useful in the sense that it's used in many other things besides money,
Right.
which confers a certain amount of value independent of its use for money, because gold is used in machinery and jewelry and all kinds of other things. So it's inherently useful. And then finally, it's scarce. And this is the most crucial. Okay, why is scarcity so important? Because that means that governments cannot manipulate the supply. Governments and banks are limited by something that is just abundant enough that people can use it for money. I mean, something like platinum, which is much rarer than gold, is probably not easily enough obtained to be practical as money, right? And something like nickel or copper, I mean, we use it sometimes in small denominational coins, but it's too common and abundant to be, to be a standard. That we kind of learned this over thousands of years of trial and error. So gold is the perfect thing for money, and the most important of those 5 attributes is the scarcity.
Yeah.
Because it means that no one can monkey with the supply. And this is the reason that prior to the institution of the modern fiat money system at the beginning of the 20th century, okay, it was possible to, to the extent that we have data at all, you could look at prices back through history and see that prices really didn't change generally.
Yeah.
There would be occasional blips here and there if there's an earthquake or a flood or a crop failure or something. But that's not inflation. That's different. And a very wise economist pointed out that if you looked at the cost in ancient Rome in gold or silver, if you prefer, for a nice toga, a pair of sandals, a sash, the equivalent of a modern day business suit, it was about the same in gold, reckoned in gold, as the cost of a 3-piece suit, circa 1900.
No kidding.
Right, so the similar, not identical articles, of course, but more or less commensurable articles.
Wow,
in
that's
different
amazing.
cultures. Over 2,000 years, the pricing really didn't change very much.
It's interesting because you mentioned being a teenager. I was nowhere near as
You were
awake.
never a teenager?
No, I was not awake. I was not thinking about anything remotely like this. But it's just recently that I realized that inflation is not a normal thing, or the rising in prices is not a normal thing. It doesn't have to be. And I think that outlook is representative of how a lot of people look at money and things like that. It's like prices just rise, When, grandparents will tell you, 60 years ago we bought that house for $30,000, and it's just accepted. Well, obviously that house today is like, $170, and that's just the way things are going to be. And then in another 50 years it'll be more than that, and that's, it's accepted as that. But it's like the truth is it doesn't. Prices don't have to always be surging, and this is a result of inflation.
Well, I mean, in the first 100+ years of the American Republic, what you had, on the one hand, was a continual surge in prosperity and in the standard of living, coupled with more or less steady prices.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Particularly commodity prices like bread and things like that.
Yeah.
There was no inflation.